I used to think that family meant forever, that no matter how messy things got, the people who shared your blood would eventually come back around. Maybe that's why it took me so long to see the truth. My name is Lauren. I'm 29 years old, and these days I live in a small, quiet apartment tucked above an old bookstore downtown. It's nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a kitchen that's too small for anyone who loves to cook. But it's mine. And after everything that's happened, that's not something I take for granted anymore. Growing up, family was complicated for me in ways I didn't always have the words to explain. We smiled a lot for the neighbors, hosted barbecues in the summer, and made everything look fine from the outside. But inside our house, love had conditions. It was the kind of loyalty that demanded silence, sacrifice, and sometimes invisibility. Still, I stayed. I stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. And I stayed the day my brother called, voice low and trembling, asking me to help him cover a debt that was about to drown him. $12,000. More money than I had ever seen disappear from my account in one day. I thought, maybe this would finally be the thing that proved I mattered to him. I thought wrong. 3 weeks after I wired the money, no interest, no contract, just trust, came home from work to find a folded piece of paper tucked under my door. It wasn't a letter, no apology, no explanation, just a cold 2-sentence text message and a key left on the counter. I need you to move out by the weekend. Thanks. For understanding. The lock was changed by Sunday. Looking back, it's almost funny how clear the patterns seem now. But when you're in the middle of it, when you've spent your whole life breathing in the same twisted version of love, you don't notice how warped it is. You just survive it. My brother Daniel was always the golden one. Even when we were little, it was obvious. Daniel had this easy smile, this charm that made adults melt. Teachers adored him, neighbors praised him. At every school play, every family gathering, he was the one everybody noticed first. I was usually the one holding the jackets, standing off to the side. It wasn't that he was cruel, at least not at first. He was just used to being rescued, used to being forgiven before he even said he was sorry. When Daniel got into fights, at school, Mom would show up with homemade cookies for the office staff and smooth everything over. When he crashed Dad's old car trying to show off for his friends, they didn't ground him. They bought him a newer one with better brakes. Meanwhile, I learned early that being good wasn't about praise. It was about survival. If I got straight A's, it wasn't celebrated. It was expected. If I needed something, it better not be too expensive or too selfish. I became quiet, careful, always calculating how not to rock the boat, We grew older, the stakes got higher, but the pattern stayed the same. Daniel blew through jobs like they were disposable. College was a revolving door, a semester here, a dropout there. I watched him take big risks, chase big dreams, fall flat. And somehow, there was always a safety net waiting to catch him. Most of the time, that net was stitched together from my sacrifices. It started small, little things. Covering for him when he missed family events, lying to my parents about why he couldn't come home for Christmas. Then bigger things. Helping him with rent when he couldn't make it this month. Taking out a loan to help Mom and Dad refinance. Their house after Daniel's bad investments put their finances in jeopardy. I skipped vacations, turned down a promotion that would have moved me across the country because Mom was too stressed and needed me nearby. I told myself it was what family did, what good daughters, good sisters did. Somewhere deep down, I think I believed that if I was good enough, if I was helpful enough, eventually someone would see me. Eventually, Daniel would see me. He wasn't all bad. There were moments, brief, shining moments, when he'd laugh with me or call just to check in, or remember my birthday with a clumsy, thoughtful gift. Those were the memories I clung to, like a child clutching scraps of fabric and calling it a blanket. It's amazing what you'll settle for when you're starving. So when Daniel called me about the $12,000 debt, panicked, desperate, promising, he'd pay me back within a year, I didn't hesitate. I didn't check my own bank balance twice. I didn't think about the fact that I'd been saving for a trip I'd dreamed of since college, a quiet week on the Amalfi Coast, just me and the sea. I just said yes. Because somewhere inside me, the little girl's still waiting to be picked. First, to be thanked, to be loved. She was louder than the woman who knew better, and that's what made it hurt so much when the gratitude never came. When the key was left on the counter, like I was just another stranger he'd outgrown, it wasn't just about the money. It was about everything it represented. Every quiet yes, every swallowed hurt, every tiny dream deferred to make room for someone else's chaos. It was about realizing that for Daniel, and maybe for all of them, I was never family. I was just convenient. It started with a phone call. Daniel rarely called me unless he needed something, but that night, his name lit up my screen 3 times in a row. I picked up on the third ring, heart already bracing for bad news. His voice cracked as he explained the situation. A series of bad decisions, a business loan he co-signed for a friend that had fallen through, creditors circling. He didn't even ask at first. He just laid it all out there, naked and desperate, like he was peeling off layers of pride and tossing them at my feet. "I'll pay you back," he said. "I swear, Lauren. Just help me this once, and it'll be different. I'm changing. I'm done screwing things up." I wanted to believe him, not because he sounded convincing. He didn't. But because I needed to believe that this time, helping him would mean something. That maybe finally he'd step up and see me not as the person who always cleaned up after him, but as his equal, as his family. I told him I'd think about it, but of course I didn't need to. I barely slept that night. The numbers spun through my mind like a broken carousel. My savings account, the little emergency fund I'd built over years of careful budgeting, the small trip I'd been planning. By morning, I already knew what I was going to do. The bank teller didn't ask questions when I withdrew most of my savings. She just counted the bills carefully, slid them across the counter with a smile that I couldn't return, and said, "Have a great day." I drove straight to Daniel's apartment. The hallways smelled like cigarette smoke and reheated takeout. He opened the door still in sweatpants, hair messy, like he'd just woken up. When I handed him the envelope, he didn't hug me. He didn't even meet my eyes. Just mumbled, "Thanks," and set it on the kitchen counter like it was junk mail. I told myself he was just overwhelmed, embarrassed. I told myself a lot of things. For a few days, he was nicer, texting occasionally, asking how work was going, even suggesting we grab dinner soon. It was awkward, but it was something. A flicker of hope, stubborn and stupid, sparked inside me. Then the messages slowed. Then they stopped altogether. I figured he was busy, adjusting, sorting things out. I figured wrong. One Thursday evening, I came home from work and found a text waiting for me. Just a few words, not even a greeting. "Hey, gonna need you out by the weekend. GF's moving in. Hope you understand." No conversation, no warning, no apology. The pit in my stomach was immediate, a hollowing out feeling, like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the first cracks. I rushed upstairs, half hoping it was some horrible misunderstanding. But there it was, my key, sitting alone on the counter. And taped to the doorframe, a new keypad lock, already installed. He hadn't even waited for me to leave. I sat down, on the edge of the couch, stunned. The room around me looked exactly the same. Same pictures on the wall, same uneven coffee table, same gray curtains I'd helped him pick out when he moved in. But everything had shifted. I wasn't home anymore. I was an inconvenience, The girl who had pulled $12,000 out of thin air to save him wasn't even worth a conversation. I could hear movement down the hall. His voice, light and carefree, joking with someone. A woman's laugh followed, sweet and unfamiliar. I stared at the key on the counter for a long time. It was such a small thing, a little scrap of metal and plastic. But in that moment, it felt heavier than all the years of swallowed hurts, all the birthday calls missed, all the tiny hopes extinguished. He hadn't even had the decency to hand it to me himself. He had let me pay for his freedom, and now that he was free, he didn't need me anymore. That night, I packed what I could fit into 2 suitcases. I didn't slam doors. I didn't cry loud enough for anyone to hear. I moved like a ghost, silent, invisible, unwanted. When I left, I didn't say goodbye. I just pulled the door shut behind me, my own reflection catching for a moment in the glass. It looked like someone else's face, someone who had finally learned. I don't know why the memory hit me so sharply that night, standing there with my suitcases piled at my feet. But as I closed the door behind me for the last time, I was suddenly 8 years old again, small, invisible, and holding the weight of someone else's choices. It had been a Saturday afternoon. I remember because Dad was home, which was rare, and the smell of Mom's apple pie was filling the house. It should have been one of those golden family days you look back on fondly. Instead, it was the first time I learned that loyalty in our family wasn't about truth, it was about convenience. Daniel and I had been playing in the backyard. He found a set of Dad's golf clubs in the garage and decided to practice his swing, right toward the living room window. I still remember the sound, sharp, high, almost musical, as the glass shattered. For a moment, we just stood there, stunned. I wasn't even holding a club. I hadn't touched a thing. But when our parents came running, red-faced and shouting, Daniel spoke first. It was Lauren. His voice was steady, almost bored. She dared me to do it. She said it would be funny. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the look Mom shot me, exhausted, impatient, expectant, silenced me, like she was already tired of the story before I could even tell it. Dad didn't ask for explanations. He didn't need any. The belt came out. The lecture was about responsibility, the grounding. Daniel hovered behind them, arms crossed, watching it all unfold with this blank, detached expression, not guilt, not worry, just certainty. Certainty that somehow the storm would always land on me instead. I spent that weekend in my room, staring at the peeling wallpaper, wondering what had just happened. I wonder if it would have made any difference to fight back. Wondering if love meant never letting someone else take the fall for you, or if, in my family, it meant taking it quietly so things could stay peaceful. That was the first time I remember consciously choosing silence over conflict. The first time I decided it was safer, easier, to be the good one, the dependable one, the one who patched things up without complaint, the one who didn't make trouble, didn't demand apologies, didn't expect fairness. It wasn't just Daniel either. Over time, the whole family leaned into the story. Lauren's the strong one. Lauren doesn't need as much. Lauren will understand. And because I was so desperate to belong, to be seen, to be valued, I played my part so well that sometimes even I forgot it was just an act. I spent my life swallowing hurts and handing out forgiveness like candy. Not because they earned it, because it was the only currency I had. And standing there that night, my life stuffed into 2 battered suitcases, the memory came full circle. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was the final act in a long, quiet play I had agreed to be a part of. A play where Daniel always got the lead role, and I was just the understudy, ready to step aside when the real stars needed the stage. I wasn't kicked out because I had failed him. I was kicked out because I had succeeded too well, in making myself unnecessary. It was a brutal kind of clarity. But clarity, even when it hurts, is a gift. Because once you see the pattern, you can stop dancing to it. Once you know the game, you can finally choose not to play. When you grow up learning to make yourself smaller, quieter, easier to love, anger doesn't come in explosions. It comes in quiet decisions. It comes in the click of a door shutting softly behind you. It comes in the steady unbraiding of loyalty you once thought was unbreakable. I didn't scream. I didn't beg Daniel to reconsider. I didn't even bother asking why. I already knew. Instead, I moved into a short-term rental above a dentist's office. The apartment was old and smelled faintly of bleach, but it was mine. Mine in a way that no place had ever been before. For the first few days, I focused on surviving, getting to work on time, unpacking one box at a time, eating frozen dinners on the floor because I didn't own a table yet. But once the dust settled, the anger came. Not as a raging fire, but as a slow, steady burn. And along with it came something even stronger: clarity. I remembered something important, something Daniel had conveniently forgotten when he handed me that key and changed the locks. When I had drained my savings to help him cover his $12,000 debt, part of the agreement, the part he had rushed me through because he just needed it done, involved me co-signing for the title of his beloved car, a classic Mustang 1967, sky blue, pristine. The only thing Daniel ever truly cared about that wasn't a woman or a bank account. At the time, he had assured me it was just a technicality. Said it would only be for a few months, just until he got back on his feet and refinanced it, himself. But months had passed, and Daniel had gotten comfortable, and he hadn't done a damn thing. Legally speaking, that car was just as much mine as it was his. It wasn't revenge that stirred inside me as I pulled the paperwork from my files one night and laid it across my bare mattress. It was justice. It was setting down a burden I had carried too long. I made one call the next morning, calm, professional, surgical. By the end of the week, a tow truck arrived at Daniel's apartment complex. The driver was polite, said he didn't expect any trouble. I didn't go in person. I didn't need to see Daniel's face to know exactly what would happen. The tow truck had barely cleared the parking lot when my phone started buzzing. 6 missed calls. Then a flurry of text messages. What the hell, Lauren? You can't just take my car. This is low, even for you. I needed that car. How am I supposed to get to work? I read them all in silence, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. I waited an hour before responding. One message, simple, final. Ownership follows responsibility. You made your choice. So did I. No arguments, no explanations. I blocked his number after that, not out of spite, out of necessity, because I finally understood. Daniel didn't need another hand reaching down to save him. He needed to feel the ground for once, and I needed to let him. The next few days were quiet, unsettlingly quiet. I half expected some grand confrontation. My parents calling to scold me, Daniel showing up at my door demanding restitution. But none of it came. Just silence. I learned later, through mutual acquaintances, that Daniel tried to spin a different version of the story, how I had betrayed him, how I had overreacted. But by then, it didn't matter. Their opinions, their sympathies, their carefully curated family narratives, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. I had untangled myself from the web, and even if my hands were raw from the effort, they were finally mine. For once, I wasn't holding the broken pieces of someone else's mistakes. I was building something new, quietly, patiently, on my own terms. And Daniel? He would have to find another net to catch him, because mine was. Gone. And I wasn't coming back. The new apartment wasn't much to look at. The walls were an uninspiring shade of beige. The plumbing rattled every time I turned on the shower. The windows overlooked the side of a laundromat instead of a park or a skyline. But it was mine. For the first time in a long time, the silence around me wasn't heavy. It wasn't punishment. It was possible. I spent the first few weeks slowly building a life that was just for me. One chipped coffee mug, one thrifted bookshelf at a time. I learned the creaky spots in the floorboards, where the morning sun hit just right across the bed, how the old radiator clanged like a stubborn drum in winter. I learned how to enjoy my own company again. Small wins became sacred rituals, hanging my own photos on the wall without asking for permission. Buying fresh flowers for the kitchen table, even if no one else would see them. Signing up for a pottery class on a whim just because I could. There was no one to tell me no. No one to remind me that I should be saving every dime for someone else's mistakes. No one expected that I would bend myself into a smaller, softer shape just to keep the peace. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud, but it was mine, and it was real. About 2 months after I moved, Daniel reached out. Not with an apology, not a real one anyway, just a short, half-hearted text late one night. Hope you're doing okay. Miss you. No mention of the money. No mention of the key on the counter. The lock changed, and the silence that followed. Just a thread casually tossed out into the darkness, as if I might pick it up and start weaving again. For a moment, I stared at the screen, feeling the old ache stir. That familiar temptation to excuse, to explain, to hope. But the ache passed. Didn't respond. Not out of anger, not out of spite. But because I had finally learned that missing someone isn't the same as being safe with them. Missing someone doesn't obligate you to rebuild the bridge they set on fire. I didn't hate Daniel. I just didn't belong in that story anymore. And that realization, quiet, clean, final, felt better than any revenge could have. That night, I made myself a cup of tea. I curled up on my secondhand couch with a library book and the sound of the city humming low outside my window. Before bed, I turned the deadbolt on my front door, my door, and stood there for a moment, hand resting on the lock. It clicked shut with a soft, solid sound. Final, certain, safe. For the first time, in a long time, I smiled. Not because someone else told me I mattered. Not because I had proved my worth to anyone, but because I finally knew, deep down, that I didn't have to. I was already enough. I had always been enough. The only difference now was that I finally believed it, and that was a kind of freedom no one could ever take away from me again.